Before we start, please make sure to like this video and hit this subscribe button so you never miss a story like this. And also comments where you are watching from, how many sons and daughters you have. Thanks. If someone burned down your home, would you fight them in the streets or in the courtroom? I'm Judge Eleanor Kane, and this is the story of how my neighborhood's self-proclaimed queen tried to destroy me, and instead, handed me the evidence I needed to ruin her entire empire. Read carefully. You might just learn how to burn someone legally without striking a single match. Chapter 1: The day she walked into my courtroom. The acrid stench of my burned house was still tangled in my hair when she strutted into my courtroom like she owned the place. There I sat, black robes, gavel in hand, staring at the woman who had just committed arson against a sitting judge. Her name? Veronica Ashford Lane. Picture every stereotype of an entitled suburban tyrant, now at a Tesla, a designer smoothie, and a god complex. The sheer audacity made my jaw ache. She didn't know it yet, but she'd just committed career suicide. When you burn down a judge's home, you better pray she doesn't get the chance to return the favor legally. And honey, I was about to serve her a 5-course meal of justice with a side of federal prison time. 6 months before my house became a crime scene, I'd been broken. My husband, Michael, had died after cancer ate away at him for 2 years. 28 years of marriage gone, just like that. Our little 1940s home in Crestwood Hills became a mausoleum. Crestwood used to be a place where retired teachers tended gardens and kids rode bikes until dark. Then the money moved in, tearing down modest homes, replacing them with glass palaces that blocked the sunrise. And at the head of this gentrification army? Veronica. My first encounter with her came while I was installing the memorial fence Michael and I had planned before he passed. 6 feet tall, cedar wood, Harold's favorite rose bushes blooming along its base. "You must be the widow," she'd said. "No condolences, just a flat statement." "Judge Kane," I'd corrected. "Right. The judge." She pronounced it like a disease. Out came her pink tape measure. "Regulations clearly state 6 feet max. Yours is over. That's a $500 fine plus removal costs." Except, the regulation didn't exist. My fence was exactly 6 feet. I'd hired a surveyor to be sure. That night, over microwaved lasagna, I pulled up court records. Bingo, 3 years ago, her husband's contracting company had stood before my bench, trying to scam an elderly veteran out of $30,000 for fake roof repairs. I'd shut them down hard. Now she was back for revenge. What she didn't know: I'd spent 2 decades sentencing murderers, rapists, and con artists, and I had nothing left to lose. Within 2 weeks, Veronica escalated from petty to pathological. The violation notices started coming like clockwork. My granite memorial stone for Michael, unapproved decorative feature. My black mailbox, non-regulation color. My bird feeder, creating nuisance conditions. Each came with a fine between $200 and $500. All bogus. I knew Colorado HOA statutes backward. Her notices were so riddled with illegalities, they could have been used as law school examples of how not to enforce rules. I documented everything: photos, dates, copies of bylaws. But the real turning point came when my security cameras caught her breaking into my backyard while I was sentencing a domestic abuser downtown. Pink tape measure in hand, she strutted around, photographing my garden, peering into my windows. And then, she opened my back gate. On purpose. When I got home, my 14-year-old tabby, Oliver, Michael's last gift to me, was gone. That cat had sat on Michael's lap during chemo, purring him through the pain. I searched for 3 days. When I finally found him at the vet, his ribs were broken. The vet said the injuries matched being chased by high-powered landscaping equipment. Security footage confirmed it. Veronica's crew had chased him until he collapsed in a storm drain. She had just committed felony animal cruelty against a federal judge's family. And I was done playing defense. When I carried Oliver home from the vet, he weighed less than a bag of sugar. His purr was weak, almost questioning, like he wasn't sure if home was safe anymore. That night, I sat at Michael's old desk in his basement office, surrounded by his worn law books and the faint scent of cedar from his wood projects. The house was quiet except for the software of my new security system. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was sharpening knives. The thing about being a judge for 20 years is you don't just learn the law, you learn how to wield it like a scalpel or a sledgehammer. Veronica had just given me both options. Step 1, Evidence Preservation. I cataloged every violation notice, every fraudulent rule she'd cited, and cross-referenced them against Crestwood's actual HOA bylaws. Not a single one held up legally. Step 2, Pattern Recognition. This wasn't just about me. I started talking to neighbors. Walt Henderson told me about the Rodriguez family, fined into leaving after being ordered to remove their Virgin of Guadalupe statue. A single mom fined for her kid's sidewalk chalk art. An elderly widow told to tear down her late husband's memorial garden. It was systemic targeting, minorities, single mothers, the elderly. People she thought wouldn't fight back. Step 3, Media Leverage. I called in Sarah Morgan, an investigative journalist who made her career exposing corruption in city councils and HOAs. I gave her the security footage, Veronica breaking into my property, leaving my gate open, her landscapers chasing Oliver. Sarah didn't just run the story. She detonated it. Judge vs. HOA Tyrant, when Watchdog's attack aired during primetime. It went viral. #Justice for Oliver started trending. Donations poured in to help with legal fees. 3 law firms offered pro bono services. Step 4, Legal Positioning. While the internet roasted her, I filed criminal charges. Unlawful entry, animal cruelty, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Colorado law treats unlawful entry with intent to intimidate the same way it treats burglary. Stack that with animal cruelty? We were talking about felony time. I could have stopped there. But then Patricia Donnelly knocked on my door. Pat was in her 70s, hair like silver thread, wearing a cardigan that made her look like she was about to offer me banana bread. But Pat wasn't just a sweet neighbor. She was a retired FBI agent specializing in financial crimes. She'd been watching Veronica for weeks. She's done this before, Pat said, spreading a stack of photos and documents across my kitchen table. Different cities. Different names. Same scam. She moves into a neighborhood, stirs up conflict, files inflated insurance claims, drains HOA funds, then vanishes before the lawsuits catch her. My pulse picked up. Pat had bank statements showing $340,000 missing from the Crestwood Emergency Fund. Insurance applications where Veronica had lied about previous claims. And, the piece de resistance, proof that she'd filed for a new insurance payout, citing rising structural dangers in our neighborhood, the week before my house burned. Your fire wasn't random, Pat said. It was part of the plan. You were the distraction. While you were busy defending yourself against fake fines, she was robbing the HOA blind. Suddenly, everything clicked. The harassment, the constant letters, even the smear campaign she'd started online claiming I was abusing my position, it was all to keep me occupied while she ran her real game. She wasn't just my personal nightmare. She was a RICO case waiting to happen. And I had just been handed enough evidence to make federal prosecutors salivate. I looked at Pat. Then we don't just take her to court, I said, feeling the steel return to my spine. We take down everything she's built. Oliver shifted in my lap, pressing his head against my arm. His purr was stronger now. For the first time since Michael died, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I finally had a war to win. The next morning, Pat and I sat at my kitchen table like 2 generals planning a war. Between us were 3 binders, a laptop, and enough coffee to keep a jury awake through tax law testimony. Pat had already mapped out the moving parts of Veronica's scam. 1. Create conflict with targeted homeowners to establish a narrative of neighborhood decay. 2. Drain HOA emergency funds by claiming urgent beautification projects or safety repairs. 3. Inflate property insurance claims to triple their actual value. 4. Disappear before lawsuits or state audits land. She's not even subtle, Pat said, flipping to a spreadsheet of suspicious payouts. Same MO in Phoenix, then in Albuquerque. Now she's here. I traced my finger over the numbers. And in each case, she leaves the HOA bankrupt and the neighborhood divided. This was more than petty harassment, this was organized crime dressed up in yoga pants. We divided the attack into 3 fronts. 1. The legal front. I reached out to the Colorado Attorney General's office and explained the scope: insurance fraud, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations. They were interested. Very interested. I also filed a complaint with the Department of Regulatory Agencies against her husband's now-defunct contracting business that opened another can of legal worms. 2. The financial front. Pat tapped into her old FBI network. Within 48 hours, we had a forensic accountant digging into Crestwood's books. Every check, every transfer, every emergency landscaping expense over $5,000 got flagged. We found $28,000 that had been transferred directly to a shell company registered under her maiden name. 3. The public front. Sarah Morgan, the journalist, was more than happy to run a follow-up story. This time, it wasn't about a judge versus an HOA president. It was about a serial con artist running multi-state scams. The day that story aired, Veronica's public image went from strict but principled HOA leader to criminal mastermind in Lululemon. Her response was predictable: she doubled down. 2 days later, I received a thick envelope from the Colorado Judicial Discipline Commission. Inside was a formal complaint against me. Allegations of abusing judicial power, intimidating homeowners, and weaponizing the law for personal vendettas. The so-called evidence? Doctored photographs of my property, falsified witness statements from her designer and personal trainer, and laughably fake timestamps. She'd also leaked the complaint to a political blog that despised me for my environmental rulings. Within hours, I was trending under #RemoveJudgeKane. Comment sections exploded with strangers calling for my resignation, some offering charming suggestions about how to deal with activist judges. For 72 hours, I watched trolls dismantle my reputation online. Pat just smirked. Let her. The harder she swings, the more reckless she gets. That's when we pounce. And pounce we did. We knew her Achilles heel: paper trails. Con artists thrive on chaos, but fraud leaves footprints. Pat's accountant contact uncovered one final gem. Veronica's homeowner's insurance application listed her home's value at $3.1 million, more than double its actual worth, with a fire hazard clause that would pay out in full for recently targeted properties. Recent, like mine. She was setting you up, Pat said. The harassment, the smear campaign, the arson, all designed to make your house the centerpiece of her next claim. That was the moment my grief hardened into something unbreakable. I'm done playing defense, I said, closing the binder. It's time to take her apart in federal court. We set the date to hand over our full dossier to the U.S. Attorney's Office. But I had one last card to play before the law took her, something that would make her feel the same helplessness she'd inflicted on Oliver, on my neighbors, and on me. Because the thing about legal guillotines? They work best when the whole town's watching the blade fall. The U.S. Attorney's Office scheduled the meeting for a Tuesday morning. By Wednesday, Veronica Ashford Lane was officially under federal investigation. But I didn't just want her prosecuted. I wanted her publicly dismantled, the way she had done to so many families in Crestwood. So I staged it. The HOA held its quarterly meeting that Saturday at the community center. Veronica, still wearing her smug smile and designer athleisure, sat at the head of the table with her leather portfolio and a Starbucks cup. She didn't know that sitting in the back row were 2 plainclothes FBI agents, the state's lead insurance fraud investigator, and a very attentive journalist with a camera. When the meeting opened, I requested the floor. As a homeowner, I have concerns about recent financial irregularities and insurance filings on behalf of our HOA. Veronica's lips curled. Judge Kane, as I've told you before, your personal issues have nothing to do with official HOA business. I held up a packet thick enough to choke a defense attorney. This, I said, is a forensic audit of our HOA accounts, showing $340,000 in missing funds. It includes wire transfers to a shell company registered under your maiden name, as well as falsified invoices for landscaping work that never occurred. The room went still. I flipped the next page. Here, I said, pointing to an enlarged document, is your homeowner's insurance application, in which you lied about previous claims and inflated your home's value by nearly $2 million. And here's the clause that triggers a full payout for fire damage to a recently targeted property. Like mine. Gasps rippled through the room. Veronica tried to speak, but I raised my hand. I also have sworn statements from residents you harassed into leaving this neighborhood. People you targeted because they were elderly, single parents, or people of color. That's not just unethical. It's a violation of Colorado civil rights statutes. She slammed her cup down. This is slander. No, I said, my voice sharp. It's evidence. And it's already been submitted to the Colorado Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Department of Insurance. That's when the FBI agents stood. One of them stepped forward, badge in hand. Veronica Ashford Lane, you are under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, insurance fraud, conspiracy, and violations of the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The room erupted. Neighbors who had lived in fear for years were suddenly on their feet, clapping, shouting. Walt Henderson let out a cheer. Even Mrs. Morgan, who rarely left her home, stood in the doorway with tears in her eyes. As they cuffed her, Veronica hissed at me, "You'll regret this." I leaned in just enough for her to hear. "No, Veronica. You will. Every day you wake up in federal prison, you'll remember the judge you tried to burn out of her own home." She was led out past the cameras. That night, the news ran the footage under the headline, HOA President Arrested in Multi-Million-Dollar Fraud Scheme. Within weeks, the HOA elected a new board. The missing funds began to be recovered. Residents who had moved away returned for visits, welcomed with open arms. And Oliver, my battle-scarred tabby, spent his afternoons in the sunroom, purring like he owned the place. Michael's roses bloomed that spring, brighter than they had in years. I sat by the fence we'd built together, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise without a single ounce of fear in my chest. Because Veronica was gone. And sometimes, justice doesn't just mean the law catches up. Sometimes, it means the whole world gets to watch,